Accused of rape, but now the case against Dominique Strauss-Kahn is apparently crumbling. But whatever the outcome, what does the future hold for the former IMF boss? Have his political ambitions been undone by overzealous officials and media, or has he been the architect of his own demise? DSK, the case, the chaos. This is Inside Story. Hello there, I'm Kamal Santamaria. So the sexual assault case against the former International Monetary Fund chief, Dominique Strauss-Kahn, is on the verge of collapse. That's what the New York Times is saying. It says 2 law enforcement officials have discovered, quote, major holes in the credibility of Strauss-Kahn's accuser. It's reported prosecutors are having a hard time believing much of what she's told them about this alleged attack, or indeed about herself. And they say since making the allegations, the Ghanaian-born hotel maid has repeatedly lied, and she may be linked to people involved in illegal drugs and money laundering. Strauss-Kahn himself faces 7 felony charges, including attempted rape. A conviction could carry a 25-year prison term. But since the start, it's all been about an accusation of rape. But there are other media reports suggesting prosecutors are now working with 3 possible scenarios that could each destroy the case against Strauss-Kahn. Scenario 1, they had consensual sex. 2, Strauss-Kahn paid her for sex. Or 3, the maid set him up in some sort of extortion plot. These are all possible, of course, and all lacking the criminal stigma of a rape allegation. So we're going to discuss scenarios today. Also, look at what sort of future DSK might have. He's already abdicated his position at the IMF, we know that. But his political ambitions extended all the way to the French presidency. The question now is, if this case is as shaky as suggested, can he make some sort of comeback? Here's our panel for today. Let me introduce them. In Paris is Christian Malade, the political correspondent with France 3 Television. In London, Brian Cathcart, a professor of journalism at Kingston University and a media columnist at The New Statesman. And rounding out our team in Belfast is media lawyer Paul Tweed, senior partner at Johnson's Solicitors. Gentlemen, thank you very much indeed for your time. Pleasure to have you all. I'm going to start with the same question to all of you, but try and get some different perspectives related to your different areas of expertise. And that question is, what if he didn't do it? Let me start with you, Christian Malade, to give us the flavour from France. What if he didn't do it? What'll it mean there in France?
Definitely, if he's going to be have less charges than the one he had previously against him, the accusations, definitely there is one thing every people say in France, is definitely he can step in words, I should say, back into the political landscape. Right now, he's friend of the Socialist Party, have organized primaries. But now, if in the very coming future, which is not a matter of weeks or months, he is freed, definitely it's going to be another thunderbolt in this country, another political tsunami. That's what some people expect, some don't. But at the same time, I must admit what I have seen today, the reaction inside the political field, inside the Socialist Party he belongs to, it's a mixture of embarrassment, relief and happiness. It depends on which side the people are. But definitely it might, let's be careful. As we live, as I said, very often in a world of fast food news and where you can expect the unexpected sometimes, it's clear that it might reshuffle the cards inside the election campaign.
Paul Tweed in Belfast, let me ask you the question, what if he didn't do it from a legal perspective? Because in many ways he's been portrayed as guilty from day one. What options are open to him, legally speaking, Mr. Tweed, if he didn't do it?
Yeah, the problem is the damage has already been done, and his legal options in terms of taking civil action to vindicate his reputation are limited, in that the press, of course, are entitled to report on criminal proceedings once the matter gets to that level. The difficulty we are having in the current age that more and more often, particularly in the US, these high-profile personalities, if a complaint is made against them, whether it's substantiated, true, false or whatever, it immediately hits the press worldwide through the internet, and the victim or the individual concerned is basically found guilty in a trial by media, regardless of the ultimate outcome. So far as Dominique Strauss-Kahn's options are concerned, they are very limited in terms of actually getting the vindication that he may or may not be entitled to in the courts. And this is a problem that high-profile individuals are coming across more and more in the internet age.
Well, let's expand on that with Brian Cathcart, who is a professor of journalism there in London. Again, the same question with a different tone. What if he didn't do it? What does it say about the media if he didn't do it? It's this, as Paul pointed out, this digital age where news moves incredibly fast.
It does. It's certainly not very flattering to the media. I think there is, if I could just contrast the way it works in the United States, as I understand it, with how it works in Britain. The prosecutors were very forthcoming with quite a lot of detail at a very early stage with this. The press, when you're told things as a journalist, your job is really to tell your readers. And they certainly piled in because it was sensational stuff. So in that sense, I think the press behaved as it would normally in any circumstance where there is sensation. I think at the same time, there is a difference between what goes on in the United States and what goes on in Britain, which is that in principle, at least in the British media, once somebody has been charged with an offence, you don't go into detail about it. The rules of contempt of court are that you are not allowed to report basically much more than the defendant's name, rank and serial number. And at that point, things shut down and some sort of calm arrives. Now, that law is actually quite often tested by the press, and there is a case in which 2 newspapers are to be prosecuted next week in Britain involving just that issue of what can be reported after somebody has been arrested. I don't know what's right for the United States. I wouldn't dream of prescribing anything, but I would say that in Britain, the restraint works pretty well in defending defendants from long-term prejudice in the public eye and in the eye of a jury that might eventually try them. In the United States, this does seem to have led to a frenzy which ran longer than it would have run in Britain and gave us much more detail than I think we would have got in Britain. And as I say, journalists, when they have this sort of freedom and when they have this sort of information, really have no option but to pass it on. Of course, in the 24-hour media world, there is a sort of snowball effect. And there's no doubt most of the world had Dominique Strauss-Kahn convicted within 12 hours of his arrest.
Christian Mallard, let me come back to you in Paris. Let me read you something, a comment which, we were talking about the digital media before. Someone sent this to me on Twitter earlier today. They said the French public will be outraged with the United States for arresting him if it falls apart, and DSK will emerge as a hero there. Is that going too far, do you think?
It might go too far, but at the same time, let me point out something. The fact it is the prosecutor, Mr. Cyrus Vance, the very one himself who 6 weeks ago was very tough with Strauss-Kahn, sent him straight to jail. The fact that all the changes to all this amazing informations coming up right now comes back from him, not even from his own lawyers, Mr. Braffman and other people. It means that probably it's true that this case might be collapsing and that it's going to ease the way, to pave the way for freedom for Dominique Strauss-Kahn in the coming future. I want to remind you that the French public opinion has been so shocked, but it's a cultural gap, let's put it this way, between United States and all Europe, France in particular, when they saw Strauss-Kahn with the police people putting him, ushering him in the car and everything. Everybody has been so amazed in the early morning, I remember in the news 6 weeks ago. Now all of a sudden it's true that the French public will be outraged, and at the same time, as I hinted at it previously, I reiterate what I said, it's going to bring a fantastic hullabaloo and problem inside the political landscape for the coming weeks, where the presidential campaign, as you know, has already started in a very tough way in France.
Christian Mallard mentioned there Benjamin Braffman, who is Strauss-Kahn's lawyer. Just have a quick listen to this gentleman. This is when he told the prosecutor, back in May I think this was actually, that he had no doubt his client would be cleared eventually. Just have a quick listen.
We believe and will prove in our judgment that Mr. Strauss-Kahn is innocent of these charges. We think this case is very defensible. We do not believe he has any intention of ever fleeing the jurisdiction. His principal intention is to try and clear his name.
Paul Tweed in Belfast, let me put this to you as we think about his legal team, about underestimating them. They seem very powerful. Dominique Strauss-Kahn is a rich man as well. He can afford top legal representation. It seems like if there was ever something to be dug up on the accuser, then this team could do it.
I think that's correct. I think the problem that even a high-powered legal team have in dealing with the media is that once the allegation is bolted, all you can really do is attempt damage limitation in the intervening period. I mean, we have a case in the past week in the UK, for instance, where Louis Walsh, a very well-known personality in the music business and in media circles, was totally falsely accused of wrongdoing, and the accuser ultimately admitted that he had made it all up, etc. But in the intervening period, of course, this story flashes around the world from Sydney to Los Angeles. Now, in Dominique Strauss-Kahn's case, the lawyer, I think, gave a very measured response there, but he was very limited on what he could say against the background, where his client was being dragged out in handcuffs. And, as you said earlier in the programme, I mean, within 12 hours, the world had taken a view simply from the visual impact of seeing Strauss-Kahn sitting in the dock, handcuffed. And this, unfortunately, this tendency on the part of the law enforcement authorities in the United States is now starting slowly to spread across the Atlantic. And I think it's a very, very bad thing for justice. I think, that we have to look carefully, and the press have to look at themselves very carefully before they just bolt off and report now in events as they see them. I mean, I think there has to be some pause before allegations are beamed around the world. I'm not sure what can be done, but it's going to be an ever-increasing and extremely damaging problem for all of us, not just the rich and famous that are going to have to deal with going forward. And Dominique Strauss-Kahn's case is possibly, subject to how things work out, could be a very prime example and illustration of this problem.
Yeah, there should be some pause. Brian Cathcart, do you think there will be? I mean, anyone in the media knows if it's
a very good question.
Oh, go ahead.
I'm not sure that, I don't want to be seen to be shuffling off responsibility here, but I think there is also a public responsibility. That's to say, anybody who's been to or followed a serious criminal trial knows that it's complicated, knows that you'd be a fool to make up your mind about, what had happened on the basis of just the prosecution evidence or just the defence evidence. You have to hear the whole case, and that sometimes can take weeks. Now, that's not what happens in the press in these circumstances. It's conflated into a matter of minutes before the public is being inundated with partial information, and it has to be partial information. So I think the public needs to recognise that you can't convict a man just on the first news reports, as seemed to have more or less happened in this case. And the media certainly, it helps if they show restraint, balance, if they acknowledge, first of all, that the charge is denied, secondly, that the defence case hasn't been heard in this case, and also pointing out, I think, in the Strauss-Kahn case, what seems to me rather prejudicial, as you've just heard, treatment of the defendant in terms of making him look like he'd already been convicted.
Gentlemen, let's pause again because I want to move the discussion on a bit and just first have a little look at Dominique Strauss-Kahn's career path, because it's been very high profile and it was perhaps set to go even further, as we have discussed. Now 62 years of age, DSK was the managing director of the IMF between 2007 and 2011, steered it through the global financial crisis, played a high-profile role in the bailouts of Greece, Ireland and Portugal. His background, though, is deep in French politics. First elected to the National Assembly back in 1986. He held the posts of finance minister, also industry minister in the 1990s. And then in 2006, Strauss-Kahn put himself in contention to be the Socialist Party's presidential candidate. He was, of course, beaten by Ségolène Royal, who in turn was beaten by the current president, Nicolas Sarkozy. But the goal remained, and he was seen as a leading contender for the 2012 presidential election, although he hadn't formally announced his intentions. Christian Malard in Paris, let me come back to you on this one. And you've touched on this already, but I'd like to go into it further. Do you genuinely believe that the presidency or a run at the presidency is still a possibility for him, that the French public, if he's found guilty, if he's found not guilty, or if these charges are proved to be false, that the French public can shrug that off?
I think a lot of people would wish that this case is over very soon and that Dominique Strauss-Kahn can step in back the political landscape, and especially for the socialist primaries going on right now, having started. And where it's not planned that they stop the process of the primaries, as the spokesman of the Socialist Party said today. But at the same time, let me put it this way. It's clear that Strauss-Kahn, who is impersonating the very right wing of the Socialist Party, the right wing of the left, Strauss-Kahn is appealing a lot of the voters who are dissatisfied on the right wing with Sarkozy. And definitely he was, or he might still be, but let's be careful, he was the big threat to Sarkozy. At the same time, it's difficult to say he could have been elected president, because at the same time, a lot of socialist voters belonging to what I call the very deep roots of the left wing, and there are a lot, there is a majority, they want somebody very on the left. I don't think he is appealing to these people. Probably François Hollande, the former Secretary General of the party, or right now Madame Aubry, would be more appealing to this kind of people. So this is why we are very mixed up with Strauss-Kahn being able to win, not to win. It's clear that if he steps back into the campaign, as I said, it will embarrass a lot of the contenders of the Socialist Party. And Sarkozy might be embarrassed too, that's for sure. But
what
we're
about
not at
on
this
the public
stage right now.
Sorry to interrupt you, Christian. What about on the public side? There's something I'd like you to clear up for me, or perhaps explain, because there is this sort of generalization out there that the French public can stomach this. If this was a marital indiscretion, that they are all right with it, it's part of society, they can accept it. Is that actually true?
Well, the thing is, everybody knows, it's not a secret, and I think it has, all the French have been very hypocritical on that, and especially the political milieus. Everybody knew for a long time the kind of relationship that Dominique Strauss-Kahn could have concerning women. We know that a lot of women in France, even journalists, said we came by two, not our own, anytime we were granted an interview by Strauss-Kahn, because he was trying to seduce the women, he was trying to chase the women and all that. So his reputation was not very good. But once more, let's put it this way, and let's not be hypocritical. In France, maybe I put de Gaulle apart from it, but since Giscard d'Estaing to today, all our French presidents had mistresses or private or unknown sexual relationship with other women. The French have been very hypocritical. I was telling one of your colleagues the other day of the US-American TV channel ABC News, had Bill Clinton been a French president, he would not have had this kind of problem, even in spite of a Monica Lewinsky affair. So, yeah, it's very French, I should say. The French have a very bad reputation on that. It's not so... No, I mean, I respect the Anglo-Saxon discipline on that. And the French don't care really about that, about sex problems, private affair of Strauss-Kahn or whoever. But at the same time, it is true that today we must admit that the image of Mr. Strauss-Kahn has been seriously tarnished. And what probably strikes the most people, the voters of the left wing of the Socialist Party, is the apartment, the money he spent in New York, living in the 600 square meters apartment downtown New York. It's too much for people being really on the left wing of the Socialist Party, especially the workers and all that.
Paul Tweed, let me bring you back to the conversation. Obviously, you're a legal expert, but we're starting to drift into the side of I guess it's becoming a social issue. Again, we speculate if these charges are to be dropped. I mean, does it present him with sorts of problems with the future, do you think, if he has this sort of reputation, or can he shrug it off as much as the French people can?
Well, I think the litmus test would be if he is cleared and if there were circumstances where he could sue for defamation of character, he would have to establish that he had a reputation in the first place. And I think this is leading on just to what has just been said there, that if he were, for instance, to bring the case in the UK courts, I suspect that there will be a view taken as to what the appropriate standards are for a man in public life. And so it might be better perhaps if he were bringing a libel action that he were to bring it in France, because obviously the public there appear to have different standards for their people in high office. But it all comes down to whether he had a reputation before all this happened, and whether this event, if it turns out that the allegations were not well founded, whether this has actually tarnished his reputation further. And that's obviously something that would have to be determined in another forum.
Let's talk to Brian Cathcart again and see what you think about media reaction to his reputation. Again, I know we're in the realms of speculation here, but we are looking at this idea of what if he didn't do it, Brian. If he didn't, how do you think the media will play it? Because, it's still a great story, and the media likes the type of story.
It is a great story, and we shouldn't forget that we live in the age of soap opera, that people have fairly short memories. They like dramatic turnarounds. They like redemption. They like people to have suffered and to have been, pilloried and cast out, and then to be brought back into the fold. And they just like the drama of that and the warmth of it, I suppose. It makes them feel good. So I certainly, on the basis of British experience, I can't speak for France, I can see that Dominique Strauss-Kahn might not, even in the British context, and hypocritical or otherwise, be completely beyond a sort of media recovery, even in the British context.
I think Christian made a great point earlier when he brought up Bill Clinton, because, again, his popularity came back by the end of his term, and now he's off as a UN ambassador in a lot of places, and it's almost all forgotten, isn't it? Yes,
I mean, I think that somewhere in the public psyche, there must be a consciousness that adultery is not that rare. And, a lot of people find it happens to them, as it were. And it's not just celebrities, it's not just powerful people. And I think there may be a sort of underlying forgiving quality there, and an underlying understanding, which in the short term, partly because of the sensation, partly because the media sell these stories in a tone of outrage. In the short term, there may be anger, but in the longer term, I think there may be, a capacity for understanding. As I say, memories are short in this age.
I've got a little bit of time left. I'm going to leave it to Christian Mallard there in Paris, seeing as this is a French story in the end, and it will play out that way when we come to the presidential election. As you say, Christian, the election is almost already underway, or the build-up is already underway at this point. Will it surprise you at all? And I guess I'm asking you about Dominique Strauss-Kahn, the man himself. Will it surprise you if all this is cleared out, that we do see him there right at the front of the presidential race in the end? Is he that sort of man, his charisma, his character, that would get him there again?
It's difficult to say, because I think you will hear a lot of French people saying that it might be possible that Dominique Strauss-Kahn has a kind of pathologic problem, and that if this kind of case, the thing is, if he did not commit a rape, which would be the worst things, the rape, but it's not going to be the case, apparently. He is not going to be charged for that. So, as you said, adultery is not so a rare business, a rare affair, so at the same time, but the reputation, as you said, the reputation, and probably some people would say, just imagine had this case or this affair happened and Strauss-Kahn would have been a candidate already on the track, campaigning, probably it would have hurted him again. So if I had a bet to make, I say it would be difficult for him to come back on the political landscape for this election. But once more, nobody holds the truth. We have to be careful. Everything goes so quick and surprisingly in this world. I think we have to be humble in front of all the unrolling events in front of us. As I said, I have always this expression, sometimes we have to be ready to expect the unexpected. So we will see.
We will see. General, I think we're going to be talking about this again. I'd like to invite you back perhaps for another discussion once this all moves on. I want to thank you all. That was Christian Mallard, who is from France 3 Television in Paris. Brian Cathcart, a professor of journalism from Kingston University in London for us. And Paul Tweed was in Belfast. He's a senior partner at Johnston Solicitors, specialising in media law. Gentlemen, great discussion. Thank you for your time. And to you, our viewers, as well. Thank you for joining us for Inside Story. As ever, you can send in comments and suggestions. InsideStory@aljazeera.net is our email address. I'm Kamal Santamaria from the whole team. Goodbye for now.